Mr. President, I have 8 requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders.
Duly noted.
Mr. President, we reached a milestone last week with the confirmation of President Trump's 100th federal judge. And frankly, it's a milestone that should have come earlier. And had this been another president, it almost undoubtedly would have come earlier. But unfortunately, the response to this president has been characterized by what the leader aptly referred to yesterday as, quote, unhinged partisanship, end quote. 2.5 years on from President Trump's election, Democrats still can't get over the fact that they lost. Somehow, my colleagues missed the section in government class where you learn that's what happens sometimes in democracies. Sometimes you win. And sometimes, and I hate to break it to my colleagues, sometimes you lose. It's not fun. No one likes having their candidate lose. But that's what happens sometimes when you have free elections. Now, Mr. President, no one expects Democrats to just sign on to everything President Trump says or does. No one expects them to sign on to most of what President Trump says or does. I certainly understand that they have philosophical disagreements with many of his policies. I've been in their position. During my time in public office, there have certainly been presidents with whom I've disagreed a substantial part of the time. But I like to think that I didn't reflexively oppose everything they said or did simply because they weren't my preferred candidate for the office. I'm fairly certain President Trump couldn't eat a cheese sandwich without some Democrat crying treason. But let's step back a minute. Maybe it's not that my Democrat colleagues are reflexively opposing everything this president does. Maybe it's not unhinged partisanship. Maybe it's just that they disagree with every single word he says, every single thing he does, every single individual that he nominates. Except in the case of nominees, at least, we know that isn't true. Let's go back to those judicial nominations. Democrats have engaged in a truly unprecedented amount of obstruction on President Trump's judicial nominees. As of May 2nd, Democrats had forced cloture votes on almost 65% of President Trump's judicial nominees. 65%. At the same point, in President Obama's first term, Republicans had required cloture votes on just 2.5% of his judicial nominees. 65% to 2.5%. But again, maybe that's because Democrats have serious philosophical objections to these nominees. Except they don't. Because again and again, Democrats have turned around and voted for the Trump judicial nominees that they obstructed. One egregious example occurred in January of 2018 when Democrats forced the Senate to spend more than a week considering 4 district court judges, even though not one single Democrat voted against their confirmation. That's right, Mr. President. Democrats forced the Senate to spend more than a week considering the nomination of 4 judges, even though not one single Democrat opposed their confirmation. These judges could have been confirmed in a matter of minutes by voice vote. But Democrats forced the Senate to spend more than a week on their consideration, time that could have been spent on genuinely controversial nominees or on some of the many important issues facing our country. As of April 2nd of this year, Democrats had forced cloture votes on 20 of the district court judges the Senate has confirmed. Ultimately, however, 19 of those 20 judges were confirmed by more than 68 votes. 17 of those 20 were confirmed by more than 80 votes. And 12 of those 20 were confirmed without a single vote in opposition. And yet Democrats obstructed all of them. Mr. President, 100 judicial nominees confirmed is a solid milestone. But as I said before, it's a milestone that should have come earlier and would have come earlier if Democrats hadn't chosen to engage in a massive campaign of partisan obstruction. Despite a lot of hard work by the Judiciary Committee and a robust pace of nominations from the President, the number of judicial vacancies is actually 25% higher today than it was when the President took office. And a near record number of those vacancies are designated as judicial emergencies. That shouldn't be the case. But thanks to Democrats' knee-jerk obstruction, that's where we are. Regardless of how much the Democrats obstruct, though, Republicans will keep moving forward. Despite Democrats' best efforts, we confirmed a record number of circuit court judges during the President's first 2 years. And we're going to keep working our way through the President's nominees, judicial and otherwise. We're committed to filling vacancies in both the executive branch and the judiciary so that the American people have the fully functioning government that they deserve. Perhaps someday Democrats will decide to drop the obstruction and to join us in the business of actually getting things done for the American people. Mr. President, I yield the floor. I suggest the absence of a quorum.